Hi, welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I'm your host, Leah Messina. I am very excited to be here today with the founder and CEO of IQBAR, Will Nitze. Will, thanks for joining me.
Nailed my last name there.
Well, I did do my research. I wasn't going to mess that up. Yeah. As a lifelong recipient of people mispronouncing my name, I try to give some extra effort to make sure I get it right.
Love it.
All right. So, I've been familiar with IQBAR for a long time. I've tried your products, love them. And I think, you have a really interesting story to tell, obviously, of how you've grown the brand. But I kind of want to start at the beginning a little bit, give some context for those listening about how you got this brand started. Can you just kind of give us the early intro story of IQ?
Sure. Yeah. So I had no background in CPG or physical products at all, or really entrepreneurship at all. I was selling software to oil and gas companies and utility companies out of college, as random as that sounds.
Very different.
It was random. But I got really into nutrition for personal reasons and wanted to be my own boss and wanted to create something from nothing. And I was 26 at the time. And I was like, all right, I think I have like a decade here where, pre-kids that I could really just grind on something. And I wanted to make something with my bare hands and own the process of a product creation, soup to nuts. And I wasn't a software engineer. And so it was going to be a physical product. And this was like 2015, 16, 17 when paleo was getting big. And I got really into paleo for personal reasons. And then I got into like a tangent of paleo, which was the intersection of nutrition and cognition via books like Grain Brain and things like that, Wheat Belly. And just got really fascinated with how the foods I ate impacted how my brain worked, that afternoon, but also what happens if I eat this diet for 10, 20, 30 years? What can I expect my brain to feel like when I'm 60 or 70?
Sure.
And for whatever reason, like very few people were focused on that. And by the way, not a ton has changed, but still everyone's focused on body and how do I build more muscle? How do I improve digestion? How do I lose weight? Things like that.
Right.
So anyway, that was like that was how I got to brain food. I thought that was a unique take on the category. Why bars? I was heavily influenced by the RX bar journey and exit. And I was like, whoa, that's cool that you can do that from nothing. And that's a big category. And I can literally make prototypes of this form factor in my kitchen. And so I started making bars in my kitchen with a KitchenAid and literally ingredients I got at, Whole Foods or what have you. But yeah, and then I, of course, pretty quickly you are smacked with a brick wall of like, how do I finance this? Because, and there's really like 2 or 3 routes you can take. The sort of romantic route is I made it in my kitchen and I sold it to my neighbors. And then I got big enough to where I sold it at a farmer's market. And then I got big enough to where I started making it myself. And then I got big enough to where I started having someone else make it. That's kind of like the storyline. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that. I want to start with a third-party manufacturer making 30,000 of these. So like, is that possible? Because I wanted to emphatically learn, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? And that was how I was going to do that. Of course, I had no money and I had no demand. And so that was why Kickstarter was a good way to start because it generates both of those things for you.
Sure.
And so pretty quickly, as I was prototyping stuff in my kitchen, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to launch this on Kickstarter. And man, we could do a whole podcast on the journey that is Kickstarter.
Yeah, just that.
But
so
that was
are you
the start.
Familiar with that platform before, like as a donor to projects?
No, I like fundamentally do not understand Kickstarter. Like it's amazing to me to this day that people will give you money and be like, it's maybe you deliver this thing to me, maybe you don't. And even if you do, I probably don't see this for 6 months. Like what an amazing sociological thing that there are enough people that do that. But there are.
They bought into it.
Yeah. And food's not even really a great category, food and bev for Kickstarter. It's like board games and electronics and wearables and things like that really crush it. Like food really doesn't. So it wasn't even a great category for Kickstarter, but it was good enough.
And so how much did you raise in that first Kickstarter program?
Yeah, so we sold it. So we did Kickstarter, and then Indiegogo was sort of a spillover, and we sold between the two $90,000 of product. So I think it was like 2,300 orders, something like that.
Yeah.
And that was enough to do a first production run with a co-packer, a tiny co-packer in the Pac Northwest that I got linked up with because I literally knew nothing about anything. So how I figured it, the first steps out were kind of how I figure most things out still to this day, was find someone who had done it like 2 years prior and ask them how they did it and then copy it. And so there was a bar company in Boston, and I was like, where do you make your product? And they're like, well, we make it here. And here's the number to call. And I called the number, and I was like, hey, I think you should make my thing. And flew out there and convinced them to make it. And so the Kickstarter got us the demand and the money to finance that first production run. And then we did that and had some excess. And then some percentage of the people who backed us on Kickstarter rebought. And then we started running Facebook ads, and the flywheel started moving.
And then, so that was all through your own e-commerce platform at that point in time?
Yeah. We had a terrible looking website, terrible logo. It was very rough. But yes, we started on D2C.
So
and then
you tend to look back and you're like, oh, how did we even let that go? But you know what? In the moment, it was good enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, so much so that I think people, this is like a theme, but people way overestimate branding. I mean, branding is very, very important, especially as you get bigger.
Sure.
But I think they underestimate how far you can take bad branding or not great branding.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will be like, okay, I need to raise X amount of dollars so I can do a whole branding exercise. And it's like, no, you should raise that and put that into inventory and product development and making sure the product's good. And the trade-off should be you have like okay branding. Right. And then later you'll have good branding. But often people kind of invert that.
Oh yeah. With the right or wrong company, you could have blew through your whole initial investment just on branding and packaging.
Yeah, I was in an incubator at the time. I remember it vividly. And I was next to this mug company, and they had like no sales, but they raised, I forget what it was, something like 300 grand. And I was talking with a guy about how he's going to use it. And he's like, we're going to put 150 into just an incredible website and this incredible logo and this insignia tethered to the logo. And I was like, whoa, like that's so crazy you're doing that. But that was completely normal at the time. I mean, still is in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you have to think, well, is the product good enough to worth that investment on that?
Usually not.
Yeah. So you made the move to invest in the manufacturing as part of it. You got your website going, and then take us along the journey of how that started to grow. And I want to hear about how you got into retail eventually.
Yeah. So what's really cool about bars is that it works online. I think I would not launch a food or bev product that doesn't work online, because I think it's just such a hack to start online, because you get really good feedback, copious amounts of it really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And because whatever you launch with is not the right answer. It just never is. And you just want to launch in a good enough spot where you can get good feedback and iterate on that. And so immediately we got feedback of, oh, it should be less sweet, or like the first product we launched with was, I think, 8 grams of sugar, and now it's 1 gram of sugar. And so people were like, hey, can you get lower sugar? This was, by the way, at the time, low sugar was getting like really hot, and then keto came and it got really, really hot. Right. And so we figured out how to iterate into lower sugar, lower net carb. It was not a protein bar to start. The first concept was brain food, quote unquote. Right. So it was just like these things, whole food ingredients, rich in nutrients, shown to be good for your brain was the idea. But 70% of people were like, hey, why isn't there more protein? And we're like, why isn't there more protein? And this is the thing about feedback, not all feedback should be taken, but the question we always ask ourselves is, could we implement this change and ostracize like sub 5% of existing customers and expand addressable market by like 10, 20, 30%. Right. And so something like that, the answer is yes, absolutely. You can be higher protein, and everyone who already bought your thing is cool with it. And then you now have a zillion new possible customers. So we've just used that principle over and over and over and over again. So we just kept iterating on product, and then concurrent to that kept our really major big expansion was still digital, but was layering on Amazon, and Amazon really quickly started outpacing website. And which was, by the way, a little bit like sacrilegious at the time. At the time, there was this big debate between D2C and Amazon, and a lot of people who were like D2C maximalists were saying, "You don't own the customer data. That's definitely don't do that." But like what I always said to those folks then and still now is like, when's the last time you bought a bag of chips on a D2C site? Like, no one does that. So for better or worse, whether we like it or not, people shop for food items in grocery stores and on Amazon. And so, it just got really big. And then, and so we took the business pretty darn far online. And then we also pretty early started knocking on retail doors in a super unintelligent way and learned some very hard lessons early on. But I still wouldn't do it differently. Our first major chain was a large drugstore chain. And so we went from being in like zero cities in America to more or less every city in America via this chain.
Yeah.
And it was just a disaster because payment terms were a disaster. We were in the wrong set and the wrong spot of the store. The target demographic for said chain was not our target demographic. It was a great learning experience. And I think we had made, at the time, it was such a crazy big number to us. I think we made like 300 grand in net profit, and then like all of it went away just to chargebacks.
Disappointing.
But in the interim, we raised money. We used that to raise money at a good valuation, and then it like went away. But we had raised the money, and then we used that to grow further.
So
it's
all
like
was lost. Yeah,
exactly. Like I wouldn't do it differently. We needed it to get that fundraising in to then move in better directions.
Sure. Yeah. It gave you a little micro MBA class in expansion in the moment. So when you got that big order, what was that like for you guys to be able to fulfill that? And were you just scrambling to get?
Oh my God, it was insane. Mind you, this is a 2-person company at the time, and so 2018 we did. I don't even remember what it was. It was like $300K, and it was only a half year, the back half of 2018. And then our first full calendar year, 2019, we were pacing to like 2.1 million, I think was our first year. Just 2 people. And the division of labor I was sales and marketing, and the other guy was ops and supply chain and finance. And when we got that first big order, they were like, cool, we're going to need you to deliver 250,000 bars in like 2.5 months to this address. Can you do it? And we're like, yes, we can do it. And then we turned to each other. We're like, shit, how are we going to do this?
How are you do this?
Because our current co-packer could absolutely not do that because they were tiny. They were doing 30,000 bar runs at the time. So it was just not going to happen. So we had to find a new co-packer, on board with them, get the materials, and conduct the run in like a 3-month turnaround time, which is just insane. So we just like started calling co-packers and calling other bar companies and seeing if they would tell us where they made product. And anyway, we got linked up with a co-packer and on the East Coast and in kind of the middle of nowhere, and they said they'd do it. And so that was how we made our first run. And even within that first run, we had this disastrous thing happen where we ordered a bunch of wrappers, and the entire team went to the first production run, because at the time we actually were conducting that run. We had ballooned from 2 people to, I think, 4 people at the time. So all 4 of us pile in a car and we drive to the place because we were going to get content and high five each other and all that.
Yeah, big moment.
And and in product mixes well and slabs well and guillotines and goes into the flow wrapper, and we're looking at it in the box, and then we are high-fiving, and then the guy's like, we have a big problem. The wrappers aren't sealing. And so we it was just like a total disaster. And I think it cost us 30 grand or something, which at the time was like just devastating. And, but yeah, stopped the line. Then had to find a new wrapper provider. And like 2 weeks later, got new wrappers, digitally printed, and did the run and fulfilled the orders.
Wow.
Even that disastrous launch had like mini disasters within it to get there.
Yeah.
But then we were at the new
co-packer along the
co-packer.
way.
But then we were at the new co-packer, and then we were like, okay, we have a lot of capacity. Like now we got to grow into this capacity really, really quickly.
So then you
So
start
we
knocking
always
on other
like,
retailers' doors from there.
yeah, I mean, most of we really were vastly predominantly an e-commerce company in 2020, 2021. Like 2023 was the first year where we had a pretty sizable brick and mortar business. And now today, I think this year we're projecting to be like 70% brick and mortar. So it's totally flipped.
Yeah. Over that period of time. Yeah, that's interesting. And so if you had to, obviously, you want the business to grow, you want an exit at some point in time. So you have to go the retail route, right? For your personal preference, what type of business do you like running? Do you like the
simple one skill? Like if I could be someone who has one SKU that they sell to like a big club chain or something, what a beautiful business. What a just absolutely beautiful business. I'm sure there are like 20 businesses like that, and I envy them. Now, that's not really an exitable business. I mean, it could exit, but it's not gonna be a good exit. There aren't a lot of buyers for that. But in terms of just running a good business that is cash flow positive, that has reliable revenue, that's operationally simple, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is not what we run. But if I just wanted a tiny team and like all of those things like that I always envy businesses like that. But we, for better or worse, always wanted to build a really big omni-channel business that ultimately we could exit, and that has a very specific shape to it. And you just got to sign up for that, and you got to do it all.
Yeah. So how did you, not coming from the D2C world, what type of research did you do to get to that, formula of what it takes to have that good exit?
I mean, the M&A markets wax and wane, and the macroeconomic environment waxes and wanes. I mean, think of what's happened since I started the company. There was, on like the just dietary trend thing, keto was this like crazy wild trend, and all big CPGs like, wait, should we all be in keto? And then like a couple of years later, they're like, absolutely not. Keto is like a scarlet letter if you have that on your box. And and then COVID happens, a once in 100-year pandemic, and you can't get cardboard. Like the most basic commodities you thought, of course I could get, you just can't get.
Yeah.
And then 2022 happens where there's like there's a total fundraising dry spell. 2021's boom time, and then that happens, and then the Trump tariffs. It's like, who the hell saw that coming? And that was just last year, and so it's like it's seesawed so much that to say that there is just one archetype that is the most attractive, I would be a lie. But I would say general principles now, especially post 2022, because pre 2022 you could be unprofitable and high growth and have a great exit. Like now, you need to be 15% plus EBITDA. You need to be omni-channel. You need to do ideally well online and in brick and mortar. If you had to choose between those two, strategics prefer brick and mortar. Because they know it and they can do it, and they have sales teams that can plug you into brick and mortar.
Sure.
They know they're not as good at e-com, and so when you hand it over, they're like, I think I'm just going to screw this up, So, but I really do feel our current profile is like kind of perfect, like majority brick and mortar, but also a really strong e-com business. Ideally you're in categories that are good categories. I think so much, and this is luck to a large degree of like, does your category become more and more attractive over time, or the opposite? Like Frozen, as an example, was like not cool, and then became really cool. And like, I think now we're going to have like a whole boom of Frozen.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Brands.
Yeah, right.
So it's just like, who could have predicted that? I don't know, and bars were were hot and then they were really boring for like 6 years and now they're hot again. And it's like, so I think it's a bit of a fool's errand to like truly try to structure yourself to perfection. But yeah, there are some tenets that in most environments will make you attractive. And the last thing I would say is a really boring one, but it's just scale. Like before you used to be, there were all these brands that exited doing 10, 20, 30, 40 million in sales. And that was an exitable business to a General Mills or Campbell's or what have you. And that's just like completely not a thing anymore. And really, aside from a couple exceptions, you have to be doing over 100 million in trailing 12-month sales to be in the conversation.
Yeah, that's impressive that it's increased that much for a real exit. Wow. I want to go back to your team because you started to kind of take us down the journey of the four of you getting into the cars. You had your number two doing operations. What was hire 3 and 4? What functions were they filling?
My third hire, I hired my wife's best childhood friend, who is still with the company today. She's a total rock star. Like she's our creative director and had never done creative directing, but she was an artist and she was available and eager and high energy. And like, it's insane how many skills she's developed and how good she's gotten over whatever it's been for her 6 years in. Because we needed someone to just create creative. We needed someone to create, social media content and design packaging and all of that. So yeah, and then I hired my wife, which is a excellent hire.
Yes.
As you can tell, I don't. I kind of just hire people that I can like reach out my hand and poke. And the more trustworthy, the better.
Yes, absolutely.
And she was head of CMO, still a CMO, but really like head of ecom because at some point we needed a like CEO of ecom. And because I long term needed to push us into brick and mortar, and it was just a lot more nuanced, and each retailer had its own peccadillos, and it's just harder, like or messier, I should say. And so she like still to this day like just owns ecom, and I'm very not involved in that. And then we didn't hire. Yeah, I mean, I could fast forward to today. I mean, we're only 14 people, soon to be 15 people, but still have a COO/CFO. A huge unlock, was getting ahead of product. Because I was always the head of product. And so that was a big weight off. But yeah, I could do a whole TED talk on like my sort of theories around the way to properly structure a team for CPG startup.
Yeah, I think that's a question a lot of people have. And obviously, payroll is a huge line item on the budget. But, I love that you've brought in people that you trust and know, and they have a different level of, needing the business to succeed, especially, when you're working with your partner. And I work with my husband, so him and I have this too of, we brainstorm together. We're talking about projects, over dinner and stuff. We do try to keep some separation, but it just helps to know that, like, okay, you got this part of the business and I have this part of the business, and we can like be responsible and have 100% buy-in, and that it's going to succeed.
There needs to be a domain expert. Like,
yeah,
my wife is the final word on e-com related stuff. Like I can and do chime in a lot. But then she's like, no, that's stupid. Here's why it's stupid. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Like, and then better,
move on.
right?
Yeah. But like you can't, if you ever get into like competing territory, it's just total disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would be your ideal sort of breakdown for the functional areas, who to bring inside the company versus, hiring a, outside person?
And I don't think there are like right ways to do this, quote unquote. I think product has to be internal. It has to, because without product, you have nothing. So absolutely. And ideally the founder is like heavily involved in that. I believe actually like at some point in the earliest stages, you should do everything internally so that you can then intelligently outsource certain things. So like just did our paid, managed our Facebook ad manager and Google AdWords and managed our Amazon. And like she did it all herself before she then hired an Amazon agency and a paid ads agency and a web development agency. And so actually it's like, I think it's actually critical to do everything that's in its infancy internally and then
know it in and
outsource
out.
those things. But like the way we've structured it is we have like CEOs of department, like everyone is a CEO of their department. We do not have mid and never will have middle management. It just, there are no managers. We are flat. So, I mean, there are kind of, but you get the point. And so, COO/CFO, they just are the CEO of that department with very little oversight. Now that can be very problematic if the person is either incompetent or untrustworthy/immoral. Like that could be a really big problem
Yeah, they
because
have a lot of power. Yeah.
there's not much oversight.
Do
So
they have power to hire with in their team?
yeah, for a long time they didn't, but now they do. I mean, for context, payroll as a percentage of revenue is 1.5%, which is like insanely low.
Yeah.
It wasn't always that way, but it is this year. But yeah, so not only are they empowered to hire people under them, they're empowered to bring on third parties. And yeah, I provide like no oversight on that. It's basically like, does this help you do your job faster, better, raise revenue, reduce costs, help us avoid hiring another person? Like, do it, just do it.
Yeah.
There's no like chain of command where like 2 sign-offs are required. Like there's no sign-off required. If you feel it's the best move, do it. And if that was wrong and the next 10 things you do are wrong, well then it's on me because I hired the wrong person in you. Like so
Right.
ultimately if you hire right, like basically everything else takes care of itself and vice versa. But we found that like we call it the hub and spoke model. So that's the hub, and then the spokes all go out to all these agencies and brokers and people like that. A lawyer and we have to be right less often there because they are more interchangeable. And even when we are right, this was a big learning for me. Being right in year X becomes wrong in year X plus 1. Like if you're doubling, you double out of everything. So your co-packer is probably now the wrong co-packer now that you're doing 2 times the number of units. And your Amazon third party is probably the wrong Amazon because all these third parties have sweet spots. And when you're doubling every year, you push yourself out of the sweet spot pretty damn quick, which is not fun because it means you have to interchange all these spokes like pretty darn regularly.
Makes sense.
But there does hit a point where you get spokes that are like mid-market, but also flex up to top run to the market. Like, and that's where we are now, which is lovely, like lovely. Cause like our Amazon agency we've been with for, I think 4 years now. And they just were big enough and good enough where they're like, we can go to infinity with these folks.
Yeah. And you get to see a lot of potential of where you can go with it then at that point.
Yeah. And you don't have to vet. I mean, it just takes so much time to vet third parties and trust new people and
onboard them.
Yeah. So
when you're like in the midst of all that, like, are you making those sort of in the moment and organically of like, we have grown beyond this, this is something we need to address? Or are you doing it more strategically of this is our growth plan, we're going to probably grow out of these things, and by next year we should start planning for that?
We've tried to get more on the latter wavelength. If I'm honest, we're more on the former still to this day. For better or worse, we don't try to predict much. So that, the whole thing of like, be proactive, don't be reactive. I've actually found we've been reactive almost through our entire life cycle, which sounds bad and is bad in some ways, but the benefit of it is you're never too proactive. So it's actually bad to be too proactive because you just bring on more, horsepower than you need and probably spend more money than you need. It's sort of like what we were talking about earlier, like doing a rebrand for 150K when you're in year 1. You just tried to pull the future forward too much. It's like you should have lived more in the moment and been a little bit more reactive, and you tried to be proactive. So
yeah, that makes sense.
like as silly as it sounds, we've got gotten to where we are via reactivity and trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds really like unsophisticated, but it's actually highly sophisticated because the market moves so much.
Yeah.
It's actually almost impossible to be like truly proactive and prescriptive.
Yeah.
You just have to you just have to try 3 times more things and iterate intelligently based on the data you collect from those trials. And if you just
So
do that
true.
over and over and over and over again, you're just going to keep growing.
Yeah, no, I love that point. It's your point earlier, just like the market changing so much, trends, and it's just so fickle. And it's like you have to be reactive in order to address whether it's economic changes or consumer taste changes.
Well, take
Uh,
Trump tariffs, right? So
yeah.
who saw that coming? Like, I guess he had hinted at that, but he says stuff all
Hmm.
the time that he
Sure.
doesn't do, right?
Yeah,
So
this was going to be the one, right?
yeah, it's like, and then it does happen, and you're like, oh, damn, and let's say you had a whole plan, which of course we do plan and we project and we forecast and we do all
Hmm.
these things, but then you get hit in the face with something like that and you have to be reactive, and we were, and then did 10 different things, and we're like, hey, that plan we had last month, like, this is the new plan.
Yeah.
So you don't want to ever shift like 40%, but it's like, we're going to shift 15% over here,
Hmm.
or delay that project we were going to do 15%.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart.
No, no, certainly is not. Yeah, you have to have the temperament to be able to ride these waves and also to react quickly. So, uh, scaling your business and going from that early stage to where you are now in the maturity, just how has it changed for you the psychology of running the business and where your decisions that you're making? And it kind of ties into the reactivity, I think, a little bit. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I have I think it's different for everyone. And a lot of it is just like your personal life journey. When
Hmm.
every human between the age of 25 and 35, I'm 35 now,
Hmm.
uh, like, that's a big personal evolution point in your life. And like when you're in your early to mid 20s, at least for me, you're like, oh, I just want to make a lot of money and I want to impress all my friends and prove all these people wrong who, thought XYZ about me. And you just have all that hubris. And it's so good that you do, because it forces you into stuff that later you'll come to be glad you did.
Hmm. Right.
Or at least that's how it is for me. But then as you get deeper into the journey, what you care about just like radically shifts. And so why you're doing the things you're doing every day, it just like takes on totally new meaning. And now I just care much more about, like, I have this team of people who this business is supporting, and they all have
Yeah.
families, and we just have like more societal impact, even if it's, whatever, 2-3% household penetration. Like, we impact 2 or 3% of every household in America. Like, that's wild.
Hmm.
And so I just, it takes like a different weight, as, or at least for me, as you get through your own psychological journey. Certain things don't change. Like, we
Hmm.
definitely are built to sell, because the second you take in investment, you are built to sell, because you have to get
Right.
those investors a return, and you're not going to dividend out, or, an investor in this type of business. Like, the way you get them their money back is you sell the business.
You
So
sell.
that doesn't change. But I remember when I first started the business, I thought, oh, this will be a 5-year journey, because the RX
Hmm.
bar thing was a 5-year journey. Well, now
Yeah.
I'm on year 8, and this thing probably isn't wrapped up till year 10. And it's like, wow, I'm glad I didn't know when I started it was going to be a 10
A
years.
10-year journey, yeah.
And
Yeah, would
these
you
are
have signed up for
hard
it
years.
if you knew it?
And these are hard years. Like, these are
Mhm.
not normal years. Every year is like 5 years in terms
Yeah.
of just like aging. Um, so 10 like really hard years is a lot. But I don't know. It's I guess I get more like focused on like just the brand legacy now of,
Mhm.
it would just be cool. I remember listening to a Laura Merrick, the lady who started Laura Bar. She had some anecdote in a podcast I was listening to where she like walks grocery stores with her daughter, and they see the product, and the
Yeah.
kid's like, "Oh, that's your name, mom." And it's like, I get more like romantic about it over time. I just want this brand to have lasting power, even post sale. And
Yeah.
um, so I don't know. There's just a lot that's changed for me.
Yeah. 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 I think as the years go on too, there's a different emotional connection to it, right? That you're growing up with the brand too. And then one day you're just going to let it fly and see what happens with whoever acquires it and, pass the torch on. But
And there are
definitely.
certain, like, I'm gonna have kids in the next couple years, and
Mhm.
that'll my like lifestyle change, and so I
Sure.
can't grind the way I used to. So I need
Yeah.
to figure out how does this business keep progressing if I'm at 70% capacity of what I was when I was 25. And I do definitely the hardest thing for me still to this day is delegating. Like it's
Mhm.
so hard.
Yeah, well, and with a lean team too, in the way that you have it set up, I could imagine that you're like, well, so and so has responsibilities. I can't delegate to them because they're busy with what they need to do. So who does it? Okay, I guess I have to do it. Or then you go through the process of finding a contractor or agency or something to fulfill that, and that takes time and effort.
Oh, how about AI, right? Like we were talking
Yeah,
about like, COVID and Trump tariffs and keto and all these
yeah,
crazy things. How about AI? Like, and it just so happens that now you can just do these crazy work streams
yeah,
via this app on your computer. And it's like that changes everything. Um, it changes nothing in some ways, and in other ways it changes everything. And it's just
yeah.
like, wow, that's so crazy to live through that like additional mega trend. And what does that
Huge.
mean for me and my business? Can I stay lean? Could we be doing 500 million in revenue and still have 15 people? I actually
Mhm.
think yes, given AI now.
Yeah. More and more as I'm talking to business owners and on the marketing agency side of my world, as people are moving on to other positions and whatnot, there's just a lot of discussion of, I just don't think I'm going to fill that role that now that the person's moving on and we'll figure it out. But it's probably not going to be with a human right now. And that it's on the cost
Depressing.
side.
Depressing in some
Yeah,
ways.
depressing, and, unfortunate, especially for people that need jobs and for the workforce coming into the world. On a cost side, as a business owner, you get it. So, but then we had a good conversation about the sameness of AI, that where is the uniqueness in content, branding, and all that, and just we're just gonna live in this gross world of everything is the same, sounds the same, looks the same, and we that's not and the brands that can afford a creative director to create something unique are the ones that are going to continue to excel.
Yeah, it just supercharges each person. So it just means that our creative director can now use Claude Cowork's integration with Adobe Illustrator or Figma to just
Yeah,
make cooler stuff quicker and more
yeah,
of it. And it just supercharges her. And
yeah.
so that's just like awesome. Cause then that saves a ton of money and saves a ton of time. Like really time I've found is the biggest
Mhm.
savings. Um, of course, it makes us all dumber, right? Like the more we use it, the less you have to think. And I actually do worry about that. Of like, whoa, am I just like outsourcing my analytical
Yeah.
capabilities, and
Right.
then I'm just totally unanalytical? Like that
Mhm.
is a real concern for me.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. We're in it whether we want to or not. So, we'll see how it all plays out.
The beauty, I would say, though, of CPG is like, man, can you like, I don't know. I won't even name them specifically, but there's just certain like functions where I'm like, I mean, you must just be terrified. And with
Mhm.
physical goods, I'm like, it used to be so unsexy. It
Mhm.
used to be incredibly unsexy. And I remember like all my friends went into tech and banking and this and that. And it
Yeah.
was just like a low status thing to make a cookie in your kitchen.
Right, right,
And
yeah.
now it's like, well, the real things are like ultra high status because all this incredible digital knowledge work is commoditized. And it's like,
Mhm.
guess what's high status? Making a cookie in your
Yeah.
kitchen. Who would
Something
have
you can
predicted that?
actually hold and feel, and like you said, like walking through the grocery store aisles and you see it, like, "Wow, we made that. That's us. That's our product." Yeah, there's a lot of allure to that. So, as we kinda get close to our time here today, and I've loved everything that we've talked about, and there's just so many good insights. So 2 more questions for you. So 1, what is life beyond the CPG world once you do hit that exit? Are you have some business ideas lined up?
Oh, I'm like, I feel like every entrepreneur has 10 side hustles going on in their
Oh,
mind and
yeah.
just fantasize about it. Although I'm like slowing down in that regard. I think I'm like most people. I want to get off the grid and open a small profit losing cafe in Bozeman, Montana, and walk
Sounds
my
great.
dog and smoke a corn pipe on my porch. No,
And not ever have to think about AI ever.
yeah, exactly. You use these tools so that you can free yourselves from these
Yeah.
tools.
Yeah.
Which is I'm being facetious, but not really. I I um I think I'm just so bullish on the physical world and all this stuff that is really depressing. I think in many industries is actually really exciting in the physical good world because you can just streamline what is otherwise a really clunky, challenging, low margin business.
Hmm.
So I think I'll stay in the physical world. I don't know what that means though. Like it could. Like I said earlier, I've stopped trying to predict things for the business. I've also stopped trying to predict things for myself because whatever. Maybe I'll have a kid and I'll be like, all I want to do all day, every day is coach my kid's
Yeah.
basketball team, you know,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and then I'll do that. If
Yeah.
that's how I feel that day, I'll just do that.
Hmm. And being an entrepreneur, there'll be that little thing in the back of your brain that'll be like, oh, they could really use a different type of soccer ball. So, yeah, but that's awesome. I love that. It's a great path to be on, and you're well on your way to that point. So, um, but Will, the last question I have to ask is, what has been your recipe to revenue?
Hmm. If I were to give a pithy answer to that, I would say ops, which
Hmm.
is very broad, but I would say great operations enables great pricing, which enables great revenue. That has been our experience. Other people get there different ways. If you're selling
Hmm.
Hermes handbags, well, you only need to sell, 1,000 a year and you have a great business. In food and bev, in mass market categories, I think being operationally excellent is what unlocks volume, which is what unlocks
Right.
revenue. And most people don't focus on that because it's not sexy and it's frankly not fun. But that has been what we've focused on and has opened a lot of doors for
Yeah,
us.
but I got the job done. Excellent. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll talk soon. Again, thank you for listening to Recipe to Revenue. And that's it. I will.